This is Mike Terry, and this is my presentation of Brazil post-Cold War era. So the basic undertones of Brazil post-Cold War is going to be um, equal parts trying to expand their reach past South America and fighting corruption in its own government. Early in the Cold War, America created the policy of containment in order to stop the spread of communism throughout the world. And this led to a lot of interference from the Americans into the politics of South America. And this led to some pretty nasty regime changes, as in the U.S. backing the coup against the Social Democrat leader João Goulart of Brazil, which led to decades of authoritarian rule. But this was thought to be over by the time the Cold War had ended, but this has proved obviously not true after in 2013 it was realized that America had been spying through the NSA on the Brazilian and Mexican presidents, monitoring their emails, text messages, and calls, and this led to controversy between the two governments. The next article I have is from 2014, and it is about Brazil trying to expand its influence throughout the world, and especially in the Middle East. So during the Cold War, the Middle East and South America had very strong ties due to them both being labeled third world countries. They had many summits to talk about how they could make policies that benefit them as third world countries. But the ties between them were somewhat diminished after the Cold War. And this article refers to how Brazil is trying to increase, once again, its position in global talks, and especially with their negotiating on the instance of the Iranian nuclear program controversy. And also in 2012, Brazilian's president, Luiz Inácio, while trying to reunite these countries, actually created the Summit of South American Arab Countries in order to recreate the ties they once had with each other. The next article is from 2015, and it refers to the Brazilian people's outrage over the current president at the time, Dilma Rousseff, who took office in 2011. She was the first female president of Brazil, and the outrage came after it was alleged that there was massive corruption inside Petrobras, which is the largest state-run oil company in Brazil, meaning that Rousseff, when she was president, was in charge of Petrobras, and there was massive money fraud going on throughout the company, whose board she hired and who she oversaw, and she was herself involved in the fraud. This is just one example of a long line of corrupt politicians in South America that have negatively affected the economy of South America in much the same fashion as the one before it, and it's actually referring to the Brazilian president prior to Rousseff was indicted under fraud charges himself after he left office, despite having around 80% approval rating when he left office. But he was found guilty and sentenced to 12 years in corruption. And this really, so throughout the 1960s on, Brazilian presidents and other leaders in South America have been prone to corruption, And this was really heightened during the Cold War, where America made it very clear that they would support a dictator over a more social left government, even if it was a just a strongman government. And this led to a dissolution of South American politics, and the the dangers of this and the consequences of this are still seen to this day, obviously. My last article is in reference to the January of 2020 missile strike that the U.S. performed in Iraq, and it basically focuses on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil's response to this, where they resoundingly supported the U.S. efforts in Iraq, stating that um, terrorism isn't just a Middle East problem, it's a global problem. And the state of terrorism was heightened during the Cold War. And whereas in most Cold War battlegrounds, the violence has really subsided, in the Middle East, you don't see that. And it has really led to a um, detrimental economic side effects. Whereas in South America, most of the places have recovered from uh, their their third world status, and it's put Brazil in a place where they can now help the Middle East.